This tutorial is for the block shapes for activity 122. So with activity 122, we have already done the additive versus subtractive. So now we're going to be starting at step 7 here, which is the construction blocks that you have previously measured in activity 121 with the isometric sketching. So you're going to refer back to those sketches in order to create your block shapes. So your dimensions might be slightly different than mine, but we are going to create these together. All right, so we want to make sure we are in our IED team or project. So if you're not sure, on your list here, you can do all projects owned by me, which would just be your IED. You can also, if you just have it in all projects, it should say IED with your initials. So double click to be inside of there, and we're going to go back into activity 122 since we're still in that activity on Project Lead the Way, and you're going to create a new folder for block shapes. And then double click inside that folder. So all of the files we make are going to go into this folder. So we're going to start with the arc. We're going to create a sketch. This is just the first way to create your arc. First, you want to create the line. You could do the arc first, up to you. I find it easiest just to create the line first, and then, oops. So 1 3/16 was my measurement. It'll change it most likely to the decimal. I find it easier to create the line first and then go to the 3-point arc and just create it from, I did not click that end point there. So if you ever make a mistake like I just did, just hit escape on your keyboard and go back to what you were doing. I find it easiest just to create those 2 points there and then put in whatever the dimension for your arc is. All right, so my measurement for my bridge was 5/8. So, or my radius, I should say, which was actually my height from here to here, which would be what your radius is. So now you're going to hit finish sketch. You just need to extrude. For me, it was 1 1/8. And here is one way to make your arc. The second way is creating a circle. So I'm just going to create a new sketch over here, which you can even do, use the cylinder here, or you can just create a sketch from scratch. I'm just going to do the cylinder, so where you want to do it on the front view. I'm going to place it here, whatever your diameter is. So mine was 5/8. So I'm going to, well, my radius was 5/8, so I'm just going to do 5/8 in parentheses and then times 2, which would give me my diameter. Then we click OK. You're going to create another, which you can do the box here. We want it to be on the cylinder, and we want it to go from edge to edge. We want the height to be the same as here we go, this part. So we want this to go all the way down. Then you can go from the side here, and we want it to cut through. So we're going to click OK. And then we would have our cylinder. We would just have to change the cylinder dimension here. We want this to extrude. Mine was 1 1/8. And then you would have your cylinder, oops, here as well. So those are the two ways to create your arcs. So you want to make sure you save these. I'm just going to delete the one, oops, the first one we made. So you're going to save this as your arc. And now we're going to move on to creating the cylinder. I'm going to close out of that. So again, you can either create a circle, extrude it up, or you can just create the cylinder this way, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to select the plane from the center. I got my diameter as 1 1/8. And my height is 2 3/8. Very nice and easy. There is your cylinder, so we'll save this one. Make sure you're in your block shapes folder. Next, we're going to move on to creating the cube. So go to create, box, any one of these views you can use. Default, I just typically go for the front. So if you don't want to create it on this diagonal view, you can click on front on your cube. That way you have it here. And my dimensions were 1 1/8 for all of them. So those would be 1 1/8, and then my extrusion here would be 1 1/8. Hit your home view, and you have your cube. Oops, so we're going to save this. Again, make sure it's going into the block shapes folder. Now we're going to move on to the square prism, which is basically the same thing as the cube. We're just going to make it taller. So my dimensions for my height are 2 5/16. If yours are a little different, that is perfectly fine. Remember, these measurements are based on what you have. And then my depth here was 1 1/8, because that's why it's a square prism, because it makes the square on the top and the bottom, and then rectangular on the sides. If you want to zoom in a bit, just hit the home view, and we now have our square prism. All right, now we're going to start moving into the rectangular and triangular shapes. So that small and tall prisms, and the acute triangle, and the right triangle. So these you can do a few different ways. For the triangle, you can do a box and create kind of edges going into it, which would be called a chamfer. Or what I find to be easiest is just using sketches to create those, but we'll do the rectangular ones first. So we're going to go to box. You can do front or top, just depends on which dimensions you type in. I'm going to do front again. I'm going to do the taller one first. So my height is currently highlighted, so that would be 3 9/16 is what I got. And for my width, I got 1 1/8. And then my extrusion, which is your depth, I got 9/16. Oops. So here is our tall triangular prism. So save that. Rectangular, not triangular. Now we're going to do the same thing, but shorter. So create, box, front view. From the origin. For this one, my height is 2 3/8. My width is still the same, 1 1/8. And then my depth, which is your extrusion here, is, I got 9/16 again. There we go. So it's the same exact thing, just shorter. In this view, it doesn't necessarily look shorter, but when you compare the two side by side, you'd be able to tell that they are of different heights. So this is the short rectangular prism. now we're going to move on to those two triangulars. When you create a sketch, which I'm going to do on the front view, what I'm going to do is use the line tool. We're going to go across. Actually, instead of going from the center, we're going to go across the center. And I got 1 5/8 for this. Now notice how my line is not on this red one. You can just use what's called a coincident constraint. Click on this line and then the origin so it centers it there. And then we also want to do the midpoint of this line to here. So it puts the midpoint of that line on the origin. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to create a construction line for my height and then use the line tool to create the lines here and here to make the rest of my triangle. So I'm going to go up, which I got a height of 13/16. And then if you are on a Mac and hit Control and then click on the line, or if you're on a PC, right click on it. You want to make it a normal construction, which you can also do by clicking X on your keyboard. So it now makes that the construction line, but I still have the height here, but this line is not going to move around as we add in other dimensions, which we won't have to do since we're just connecting these two lines here. So notice I now have a completed sketch because it has filled in blue, which we can actually move this height outside here so it's not inside the shape. We're going to hit Finish Sketch. I'm going to go to my home view. We're going to extrude, which I got 1 3/16. Click OK. And this would be the small triangular prism. You can call it small, short, whichever you would prefer. And now we're going to work on adding the tall triangular prism, which I'm going to do in the same way. Again, you can add the rectangle and then create a chamfer on it. I just find that to be a little bit more tedious than it needs to be. So for here, we're going to go back to using the line tool. I'm going to start at the origin since it is a right triangle and do my height first, which I got as 2 5/16. Go back to the line tool. I'm going to do the width I got now, which is 1 inch. And now you just have to combine the two on the diagonal. Finish the sketch. Which you could have done this going the other direction, which it doesn't really matter what you do as long as the triangle is on your front view. You have created the best front view for the specific shape because the right and the left are going to be both looking like rectangles, so it doesn't matter which direction you put your slant. But my extrusion I got for my depth is 1 1/8. And now you have your right triangular prism. All right, so the last one we have to make is the bridge. So we're going to add a new design here. I'm going to create it with the primitive modeling. I'm going to do this on the front view. So my height I have is 1 1/8. My width is 2 5/16. And my depth is 1 1/8. All right, so here is the general size of my bridge. We just have to do the arc portion. So I'm going to go to the front view. I'm going to use the cylinder and I'm going to have it cut through my bridge. So I want to kind of go over the middle here until I see the midpoint right here. So remember, you're looking for that triangle over the X. It is a little hard to see. Now, for my diameter, I measured the edges. So from the point here over into where the arc starts. So I don't actually have the diameter of, or the radius of the arc, which in this case would be the diameter of this circle. So the way I'm going to type this in is you could either have measured in between the two edges of the bridge, so basically that gap, or you can do what I'm about to do, and you have your overall dimensions. So you would have your 2 and 5/16 minus, and this would be my 3/8 on either side. So this would be my 3/8 times 2, and that would be the diameter of my circle. So it's the overall minus the 3/8 times 2, because it's 3/8 on this side and 3/8 on this side. So now I'm going to go and just pull this all the way through. Doesn't matter what that dimension is, as long as it is a cut. This is red, so I get that arc portion of my bridge. Hit the home view, and the bridge is now complete. And all of our 9 blocks have been completed. If you create them in different ways, these are just a few of the ways you can create these different shapes. So we're going to save this. Oops. The bridge, make sure it's in your block shapes folder, and everything's now done.